Welcome back to the Mid-Year Mitch YouTube channel. Today's episode, I'm going to show you guys some tips and tricks on fixing fiberglass, specifically holes in your panel, and I'm going to show you some tips to prevent that repair from coming back. So be sure to stick around. Our goal for this video is to tackle this hole here and to tackle all these little holes the whole way around this panel. So this roof was glued on a car, and it looks like they drilled holes to try and drill out the bonding strips, the rivets out of the bonding strips, so they could pull the top off, which you can see it worked here because this bonding strip's attached. And then there's just this giant hole here. I guess this would have been where the antenna was. So I don't know if the antenna got caught on something and ripped a hole. They just riveted a piece here, so we got to drill all these out. But I want to talk about some tips and tricks on how to fix these types of repairs, because this can be a tricky area to fix, and little holes like this like to come back. Before we start fixing these fiberglass holes, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what we're working with. So if we have our panel here, let's pretend this is our roof skin. Let's do a quick sketch like this, and this is the hole being drilled into the panel. We're looking at the car sideways. This is the hole we have to fix. Now the best way to fix this is to come in here with a rough grit, let's say 26 to like 40 grit paper. We want to come in here with that, and what we're going to do is prep one side. You can pick the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter, but we're going to come in here and taper this back kind of like this. We're going to grind all of it, and our whole goal is to remove this sharp edge, because this sharp edge, if you just fill this with body filler or something, you will eventually see a ring come up. So the best way to fix this is to taper it out, and we're using this really rough paper to give us a bite whenever we put our fiberglass patch in. So after we prep it, we're going to back it with something. So I like to use like foil tape or something to keep the resin from falling out of these smaller holes. We're going to come through here, and this is maybe a little dramatic. We're going to come through here and fill it with fiberglass. There's going to be, just to say, there's 3 or 4 layers of fiberglass, each one being a different length. And because we gave it a really rough tooth, this fiberglass will stick. So then what we're going to do is the same thing on the other side. We're going to flip it upside down. If you can get access to both sides of the panel, that's really ideal. If you can't get access to both, you're just going to kind of have to go with this. Then what you're going to do, the same kind of thing, grind into it kind of this way. You're going to want to taper into it to give yourself a tooth, and then you're going to come back here and lay some fiberglass in here. Maybe there's be a little bit here. That should be a little further. Kind of like that, if you get what I'm saying. You want to do it from both sides. Then when you're done, you're going to want to grind it smooth, so that way you end up with the same thickness. Whatever this thickness is, you want this thickness to be. The reason for that is because if you set this car out in the sun and it gets hot, the fiberglass is going to expand. You put it inside, it's going to contract to back to how it was, and back and forth. This will grow at a certain rate because of its thickness. It's a ratio between just your overall length, width, and thickness. That will grow at a certain rate, but if this is thicker, this will grow at a different rate. So if the whole car is growing at one rate and this isn't, you're going to see that repair, which over time could crack the paint, but most likely you're just going to see that, and if you kind of dance around in the light, you'll see it. For those of you who have done this kind of work before, you know what I'm talking about. So if we come in here and we draw up our other patch, let's say this one is the patch for the rear deck, and this can be applied really to any type of fiberglass repair, not just Corvettes or cars. So this is our big hole in here. You could come through here and take a little piece of fiberglass, and you could, put it in the middle, you taper it out, and you could splice that piece in. The hole we have here is kind of on the limit of whether I would do that or not. I think I'm just going to build the piece myself. So what we're going to do again is taper this back, but this time we're going to taper it back a little bit further than what we did up here for that small hole, because we want a really good bite. That's a really big hole, so we want to get a good bite on this rear deck. We also don't want it to show up, so if we spread it out, it's less likely to show up. You're going to have less hard edges. This one being so big, we will need to back it, but backing it with tape probably won't do. So we're either going to have to get a little piece of fiberglass with some tape on it and hold it up in there, or we're going to get a piece of metal to back it. I just want something that's not going to stick. And then when we're done, we'll flip it upside down and patch this side of it. You always want to try to patch both sides if you can. That'll give you the strongest fiberglass repair and the best chance for success. So before we begin, we need to give ourselves access to both sides of this panel. You can see this bonding strip is here. From here to here, it's on both sides. So I'm just going to take some time and carefully split this away. Then we're going to come in with our roll-lock and prep all of these holes. It looks like some of these were already prepped, but we're going to prep them again just because there's some red paint in them and a red oxide primer. We want to have good, clean working surfaces. So I'm going to get all this stuff prepped up, and then we'll start laying some fiberglass. I got a little bit excited there, and I forgot to show you what everything looked like once it was ground and prepped. I'll show you on the back side. But I have my patches in here. I came through and I put foil tape on the back side of everything after I scuffed everything with 36 grit. And below this I have a piece of plywood, and I have foil tape on top of that, and I have it clamped in here to give me a backer, so that way I could push down on here. There's a couple little waves in here, but we'll be able to take that down. There's enough material here. I tried to build it up a little bit in case there were a couple little whoop-de-doos in there, but once we hit this with the DA, and we'll hit this with a block, and we'll get this contour the way it's supposed to be. And I filled all these little patches up in here. I just tore little pieces of fiberglass. A lot of people are probably putting this in the comments, why didn't I just use scissors and cut out little pieces? Now, if you're cutting out little pieces to fill holes, it probably would be good to at least do one layer of that. But what I like to do is tear it so you get this nice jagged edge instead of this nice sharp edge, because all these little extra lengths of the fiberglass are going to be interwoven in here. Rather than there being a hard stop, that might be an area where it would fail, where you have this loose edge the whole way around, it's kind of biting and spreading the load further out than just around the patch. So when we come back and sand all this, we'll get down and it'll just fill it in real nice. So that's an area I like to do. If you have an edge like this, I like to try to butt it up against an edge like this, so that way I have the maximum grab on this side. So this stuff is curing up, and I also added some pigment to it. That's something I like to do for external parts like this. It really doesn't do anything other than just visually kind of give it some color, but I figure these areas don't matter as much. But the area in the back, I figure let's not make it clear. If you have a clear patch, maybe when the sun hits it, it could potentially show a difference in color. So I try to tint the fiberglass so that way, you know, whenever we sand it, it's less noticeable that there was a patch, but also that maybe it'll do something in the long run with the color. Probably not, but in my mind, I think it looks good. So we're gonna let all this stuff harden up here, and then I'll scuff it down real quick just to knock all the ugliness off of it. So I sanded all my patches down. I started off with 36 grit just to knock all the little pieces of fiberglass off and all the stuff that was hanging off here, because that stuff can chew up your DA paper. So I knocked all that stuff off. Now I really can't sand all that well because this is really thin and floppy. I'll wait to really make this stuff nice once we have the birdcage back and I can set it on, and I'll get all this cleaned up more. But this is just the first pass, just to knock it off and get it so it's looking good. I got a little messy with the resin in a couple spots, but I'll clean all that up later. I had a couple little air holes pop through, but I'll get those patched up. So that also looks really good. So our patch back here has a little bit of a high spot, but it's pretty darn good for what it is. It's gonna need, I don't know, a little more playing with, and it's just gonna need a little bit of filling in here, or even a little bit of filler primer would probably fix that. But I'll leave that for now. And this stuff, again, needs to be sanded a little more once the bird cage is here and the doors are introduced. But it's all a really good foundation. So now let's carefully flip this thing over so we can do the underside of this. I did find a little crack here in here, which is why these patches are so big. But I need to get in here. This will take some time to carve out. So let's flip it over, sand the underside, and then we'll lay up fiberglass on the backside, just so that way all the holes are gone. So now that we have the rear clip flipped upside down, if you look, you can see all of our holes from the backside, and that tape left us with a nice flush finish. So really what we could do is grind all of this, because you can see this outline through here is where another piece of fiberglass glued on to this, so that way it could attach to the birdcage of the Corvette. Really, you don't need to, you know, fiberglass the backside of all these. They're all flat, and the glue would take that up. That would make it strong. That's one way to do it, but there's a possibility that this hard edge right here, this is a good example. You can see the fiberglass didn't get completely down around this edge. That might show up later. So that's what we want to taper. So again, we're going to make a nice little cloud or whatever around here. We're going to taper all this in and then lay some fiberglass here. And then I'll probably leave it for this video, just let it cure up. But whenever I go and prep all of this for gluing, I'll just come and sand all of this and make it flat, and then we can glue it on the car. Now you see the back side of this, it cured up nice, and that's also pretty flat. There's a couple little ridges in it just from the tape, but that was exactly where the antenna was, so it must have gotten broken off, and that's why there's that hole. There's also a little bit of cloth here, which I don't think there's a crack on the other side, so I don't know why that's there. There's no crack on this side. I wonder if that was some kind of a factory piece. I don't understand why that's there. That's quite random. But I'm just gonna get all these prepped, and we'll lay up some fiberglass, and I will show you what these looked like once I ground them out, since I didn't show you on the other side. So I scuffed the backside, and I got a little excited on this one. We're a little thin here, so we're gonna have to go back and fix this one from the other side, because I can see through it. You can see all these were little holes about this size, and I ground it out and tapered it out, just so that way we can make sure we get a good bond. And all of those look nice. Now the back was a little interesting, because where this piece broke out went right underneath part of like the bonding strip or the flange for this rear tub. So what I did is I ground away a little bit of this flange, so that way I could reveal the deck underneath it. This flange kind of covered it, about this much of it off. So what I did is I'd ground all that out so I can lay a piece of fiberglass in here, and I'll bring that fiberglass into this area here to reinforce this, to put all the strength back in it. But what I don't want is the body to crack right here, because I didn't give it good enough support. So we did that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get some fiberglass ripped up, and we will cover the backside. I probably won't add the coloring to this, because it really doesn't need it. It's the backside. So I finished laying out the patches on this side, and I'm just gonna let these guys cure up. They all look really good, but I'm just gonna let these cure up so that way I can just grind and prep all of this area to glue this on the back of the birdcage once, you know, we get the birdcage back. But this is all looking good. Same thing back here. Just laid all this up, and that kind of buried it. We tapered everything in, so now it's reinforced on both sides. When this area dries, I'll just knock the ugly off, and then I'll probably just hit it with 80 just to kind of smooth it up a little bit, but we don't have to make this, you know, perfect back here. We just want to make it close to the right thickness. So just for some quick tips on supplies I use these 1-inch chipping brushes to dab it in. I tried using rollers, but I just wasn't quick enough with cleaning them, and I had a couple of them go bad. And I think this works fine to get bubbles out. I buy them in a big box of just a couple dozen of them. They're pretty cheap, and they're disposable. For my board, I like to just use a piece of cardboard or a thin piece of wood, and I wrap it in parchment paper. And whenever the fiberglass dries, you can just peel it off like this. So after I get a layer on there, I can peel it off, and then it brings it back. I'm due for a new sheet because you can see I have some holes in it. But that works really well for applying it. And I just use some little mixing cups. I have to go get some more of this fiberglass. It's from Fiberglass. Their name's kind of spelled funny. I like using the fiberglass tape. It comes in a big roll. I think it was about 4 inches wide. I'm gonna have to get some more of that because that stuff is awesome for little repairs, kind of like this, if I just need to rip some pieces off. And it's really great for stuff like this because you don't have to deal with a giant sheet. But those are just some of the tips for things I like to do with fiberglass. And normally I just speed through this, but that's all the down and dirty details. So next week, we should be getting the birdcage back. But in the meantime, I would like to start working on this rear floor. Now I know it's a little unorthodox to start putting a rear floor in a car that doesn't look much like a car. But I think what we're gonna do, since this is not attached to anything, cut this floor off, glue the dynamic floor in, then we can flip it upside down and we can quickly body work the underside of it, which I haven't been able to do. I don't have a rotisserie or anything, so we'll be able to clean up the underside to get that looking pretty nice. So I think I'm gonna do that in next week's video. Then we'll start putting bonding strips on the birdcage, the firewall, the floor, and I have some ideas for stuff to do with the floor. So there'll be some good videos coming up, and hopefully in about a month's time, this thing is a really nice firewall back split window. But that's gonna do it for this video. If you enjoyed, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. We have a lot of work to do on this car. The birdcage will be coming back soon, and we'll start turning the split window back into a car. So I got a lot of work to do, and I'll catch you guys later.